He did very careful.
Yeah, he had it in his
We're
hand.
waiting.
Oh, wait, he's got the phone.
All right. All right, call the order, Sunshine Statement.
This meeting is being held in accordance with the public laws of 1975, Chapter 231, and an adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by a notice sent to the Asbury Park Press, the Two River Times, and the Star Ledger, and posted in the main lobby of the municipal building and on the municipal website.
Thank you. Pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Councilman Yassin?
Here.
Councilman Triviano? Here. Council President Yingstrom?
Here.
Councilman Ballard?
I'm here.
Councilman Zibridge?
Over here.
Councilwoman Horgan? And Mayor Mena is also absent.
All right, so, first up was.
I'm sorry, before we get started, Mr. President, do we have agendas?
Oh, sorry.
Well, first up, I want to just get Charlie out of here because he has a couch to 5K, so I'm going to let him go first.
Still be on the chair now, but-
Thank you.
Thanks for letting me go first, everybody. Just a couple of things to highlight in the report. Thanks to everybody from PD, Fire, and
thank you.
you for all the help with Memorial Day. Special kudos to Cindy and Oscar who do all the heavy lifting. Just want to mention too, we're going to partner up with the Navasink Maritime Heritage Association. It's a local nonprofit. They're going to do free sailboat rides for families out of Marine Park on the second Tuesday, starting in July. So July, August, September, potentially October. It's free. You can sign up through us. Just a cool way to get more families out on the river for a quick hour to learn about some of the history of the boat and our area. Just also want to mention the Pride in the Park event slated for this Saturday, 12 to 2 at Riverside Gardens Park. We have a poem being read by our students. We got a great band, Secret Sound, performance from Rocky Horror Picture Show. We're giving an award out to the local youth advocate, and there'll be 7 or 8 vendors there too. So spread the word. It'll be a really cool event. I'll go off script a little bit. Thanks everybody who showed up for Jazz on the West Side the other night. It was a huge turnout. Any questions on anything like that?
No question. Thank you for all
Hey,
your.
Charlie, sorry, before you leave, I just wanted to again give you kudos for putting on that Memorial Day parade. It was all fantastic. You know, I heard from the mayor, we hadn't had one in 30 years, and you kind of put something together that exceeded my expectations. Not that I had low expectations, but you know, it was very, very well.
And you did a great job with the weather too, Charlie.
Yes. So I was in charge of the weather. Cindy and Oscar and everybody did all the other stuff.
And I do have to ask, who got the planes to fly over? Was it-
I took full credit, which was a bold-faced lie. Now that
Now that it's over.
You don't have to worry about the bill for jet fuel, though.
Oh,
That's the plus side of it.
Kudos, thank you.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
Under recreation, we've got to also accept the Kimball Horn report, which was also distributed. So at the next meeting, unless there's any comments or feedback, the next meeting that will be listed for formal action. There's 2 resolutions related to recreation. One of them is for the purchase and installation of a track over at Calvasi Fields. That will be through a co-op and hopefully an agreement that's to effectuate the cost sharing that was discussed with RBC for that track and other aspects of the field.
Okay, are we going to discuss this with finance?
Sure, we can.
No.
Okay, thank you. Under admin, just want to get our engineer also out of here.
Good.
All right, so can everybody hear me? I'm usually not so good at getting close to the mic. All right, there we go.
So I'm happy to report that we anticipate East Bergen will be complete on Friday.
Yeah.
You'll see that they have been paving, they're through up to South Street. They've been doing the intersections as well. They will be milling tomorrow and then completing from Hudson to Route 35 on Friday. So
The state's equipment's not in the way, is it?
hopefully they move it. I might personally move it. So I'm happy to report we will be substantially complete there. We are still coordinating with JCP&L on work at the pump station, but the road will be paved. Moving forward with our report, the Mill and Overlay Road Program, which included McLaren Street, Tilton Avenue, Grant Place, as well as the apron at the firehouse on Mechanic Street. That is currently out to bid. The bid opening is scheduled for June 19th, so we're hoping to roll that construction occurring shortly thereafter. White Street is in the design phase. I wasn't sure, I had provided some parking minutes on it. Do you want to discuss that here? Or not yet? Not yet, okay. So that is currently in the design phase, as well as submitted into EIT for the water and sewer improvements that are necessary there. As it relates to the next phase of the road program, Broad Street, as you're aware, received a municipal aid grant. There are some utility improvements which will be necessary there, but we're ready, and I think we budgeted or included that work in the bond ordinance for that. In addition, we worked with the Department of Public Utilities on, they created a road matrix. We've gone through and prioritized those to create a list of roadways that we think are good candidates for a mill and overlay program for perhaps the fall. We've also looked at some roads that will need some utility improvements and how best to phase those in, whether or not we can include a crack sealant program, which would get some longevity from the roadways. We also identified our municipal aid. We're gonna recommend that Spring Street be included for a municipal aid grant for this coming funding cycle. So we have gone through and done that as well. I am in the process of following up. The borough was awarded the NJ TAP grant for Shrewsbury Avenue Streetscape project. I'm in the process of following up with the DOT, just how they're gonna be administrating that. In other municipalities, they're only currently working on their 2016 grant award. So I just wanna make sure that we're, they know we're ready whenever they're ready. The senior center, that contract was awarded and is under design by MSG Fire. I've been following up with them weekly so that they know that the project is urgent and we'd like to see it move forward.
So does that mean you're lighting a fire into that?
I'm lighting a lot of fires.
Good.
East Side Mohawk Pond, so the construction is moving relatively slow. I think everyone has seen that. I'm hopeful that with East Bergen wrapping up, that I can put some pressure on that contractor to really get the work moving and complete. So I'm still hopeful that we can finish that within the month of June. But if not, we may have to go to council on contract timing and what may be necessary to light a fire under him as well.
You already know my concerns, so.
Understood. Pearl Street, that's been submitted to the DOT. That's being worked on by another consultant. In addition, the primary access drive, that construction is underway. I know that the council has a change order before them, which is a net zero on the actual contract cost, but it was for tree removal and fence repair as an additional section of pavement. In addition, I did follow up with Cliff as it related to some of the water projects. I know on the SCADA, they're hoping to have the training completed within the next month. The meter project is ongoing. I think there's approximately 200 left. And the chemical feed, there was an issue with the augers, and so we're evaluating their performance before we accept those. And I think that was everything I had. I'm certainly ready for questions.
Did the August go again?
Not yet.
I have a question on the Shrewsbury Avenue grant. So I understand Shrewsbury Avenue is a county road, so I imagine we're gonna have to coordinate with the county on what's done and how it's done. How do you perceive that, playing out?
Honestly, I don't see it as too much of an issue because this isn't really within the pavement. There's some areas where I think we'll have to coordinate with their public works when we had originally looked at this project with some bump outs for maybe some traffic
I'm sorry,
calming.
with their public works?
Yes, with their public works, not our public works.
Okay.
But beyond the curb line, so curb line out, not pavement, is really our responsibility, so I don't think they would have an issue with what we would be putting in. So we would certainly just look for their concurrence.
I mean, this grant is focused on like the fixtures and things like that.
That's correct, it's a streetscape project, lighting, sidewalk areas.
So one of my concerns then was the electrical issues at the corner.
The subterranean electrical.
Right, where, you know, the lamp posts aren't working and some of the electrical sockets aren't working. So is that our ownership or is that the county where we have, because I imagine some of that grant money, now that we have it, can go to fixing stuff like that.
That's correct.
But we have to coordinate with the county, because I've always been told it's a county road and we have to get them to come and do that electrical work.
Correct. I don't think we're gonna have an issue only because at some point the county was actually, was looking to proceed with this project. So they're probably.
And they got a windfall.
I mean, we're
So
paying
then
for
it should
it.
be, so then it should be a good collaborative effort.
Yes.
There shouldn't be any resistance. When we were preparing the grant application, I connected with them, got letters of support from them. Their freeholder board passed a resolution in support of this, and their engineering and planning office was helping us in the application, making sure. So what would happen is, you know, Laura's going to be liaising with the state in terms of, you know, the grant mechanics, and then after that we'll probably have like pre-construction meetings and design meetings with them. And, you know, just like anything else, we have to send them our plans for review and concurrence. So probably, I would say more, not before 6 months to the end of the year at least, I would say, before we're at that phase yet. Because the state awards the grants and then they've got to actually release the funds and explain how you're going to get the money and all.
And we
So-
have all the design work that has to be done,
Exactly.
and then any approvals that need to be sought.
Right.
That whole, it just, it'll take time.
There are no time limits attached to the grant. right?
I think they had, 2-year timeframe.
Okay. So we have.
You have a 2-year timeframe to complete it, or let's get started?
That's one among the things I'm clarifying with them, was with the timeframe they had imposed. What I will tell you is with the 2016, they did roll out where they also included some engineering costs.
Right.
So that's part of my questioning back to them is, while we had this grant, are you also doing similar programs with engineering or soft costs?
Right.
Or are you looking for a physical award within the two-year timeframe?
Thank you.
And as somebody who drives down East Bergen every day, thank you.
Yeah, and residents have reached out to us and they've been posting online, they're grateful and they feel relieved.
We're all
so.
excited about it.
I'm happy for them.
It's only about 6 years in the making. It predates a whole bunch of you sitting at the stage.
We're getting it done.
Finally,
We're
yeah.
being regretful.
On some of the things that Laura mentioned, she was talking about the road improvements for 2019 and 2020, the new list. That one should be finalized, should have been finalized today, so we'll send that, and that was the next item for discussion under engineering. We'll push that off until the July meeting, so you can send that all to everyone and you can review that. Also, with respect to the primary school access road, Laura did talk about the change order on that one, even though her firm's not handling, she's on top of what's going on with that. The road is being milled and paved as well. Not milled, just paved. So that should hopefully be wrapping up soon as well. And the change order, as she talked about, any questions on that?
Yeah, it's a $0 change order, so it's all included the original.
I have a residential question about the emergency drive, because I live close to it, and people have been asking if their kids will be allowed to walk back to school.
I don't think there's anything precluding that. They will have the barriers so that a
They've
vehicle
actually been
can.
walking back, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
For-
for a
in
while
the
you
way,
couldn't,
but-
I mean, be jumping a fence and there were tall weeds and stuff, but
Yeah.
I'm asking if
But
when
they-
it's finished, it'll be allowed to use as a way
I
school.
believe as a footpath.
Nothing,
Yeah?
nothing
Okay, great.
included. Also under engineering,
How
what we
faster?
did a couple months ago with respect to Pearl Street, White Street, and the 2018-2019 combined road project, I'll be sending out solicitations for the following items, which are all budgeted for the water valve exercising program and our GIS program as part of our water infrastructure system, to really understand where everything is and have it mapped in a tech-friendly format. And as part of that, it would be valve exercising, which is something that's required under the Water Quality Accountability Act and our reporting requirements for the state. So that's one project that would be lumped in together, as well as a traffic circulation study for around this downtown area to see how we can improve traffic flow and really get a better handle on our streets and directions and, one-way, two-way, parking, et cetera. And then finally, the Broad Street and Safe Streets to Transit grants. So those were, Laura was talking about the Broad Street, both because Broad Street and the grant we got for Safe Streets to Transit, I believe, was $100,000. Because they're both DOT grants, we thought we could lump those in and get a scope of work on those. So those are 3 projects that probably in the next 2 to 3 months, I'll have proposals for, evaluate them, and then make recommendations for award of professional service contracts to engineering firms to design and administer those 3. So that's all I've got for engineering. If somebody else has any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Under resolutions, back to general stuff in administration, we may have some resolutions to memorialize the English Plaza easements, some of them. They'll be trickling in as legal counsel gets them signed by some of the properties for the project that's going on. We've got 2 resolutions to accept retirements of some employees. We also have the award of contract for our grant consultant. As you know, we went out to advertise for that one because the 2 6-month iterations had concluded, and I did send all of you an assessment of those evaluations, and I'm making a recommendation, which was in your packet. So unless there's a need to go to executive session tonight, then that will be on the June 19th agenda. And then finally, we'll be memorializing a settlement agreement that was discussed in the executive session at the last meeting. That will be memorialized by way of resolution at the next meeting. Any questions on any of that legislation? We did get our IT report and our grants report. Any questions there? Okay.
Ryder's doing a great job.
Excellent.
Chief?
So I don't have enough, much rather, everything's in the report. We have seen, I know it's not in the April report, the May report is still pending, getting done by our records bureau, but we have noticed a definite uptick the last 2 weeks of activity. As summer hits, it seems like we're becoming more and more seasonal as far as crime activity, but that won't be reflected until the May, June stats. As you all know, Sergeant Hicks retired June 1st. We also, as the administrator alluded to, we have another retirement pending by September 1st. Our Sergeant Talrico submitted his retirement. So that will, there'll be some more changes coming up in manpower and structure once his retirement is completed in September, including a full evidence audit and some review of processes in our records bureau. As far as resolutions upcoming, one is very administrative. We're auctioning in the next month or 2 some seized cars or impounded cars, just as a matter of course. We do it once a year, give or take. So we have about 15 vehicles to auction off. There'll be a resolution hopefully in June, and for that, just authorizing us to make the sale. And also at that same meeting, hopefully a resolution to appoint our final steel one for the summer. We have 3 typically. We only appointed 2 in May because one declined to come back for a second year. She took another opportunity. So we located another candidate that will put it forward for the next meeting, who will be trained and ready to go. He's actually in the academy now through a high school program, a pilot program, Red Bank Regional is running, that will get him certified when he graduates from high school. He's a Red Bank kids who I try to give him an opportunity to use the certification he got through Red Bank Regional.
What's a new program?
That's a new program that the Police Academy and Red Bank Regional started this year to get some kids who are interested in criminal justice careers certified as a SLEO 1, which is really a seasonal summer job, but it's a nice stepping stone to give them some insight into real life law enforcement. So we identified a kid in Red Bank Regional who was looking for a position like that, and it seemed really good, so hopefully we can put it forward. And then just, it's 2 months out, but National Night Out is scheduled for August 6th. Officer Shields just started working on planning of it, really this week, so hopefully we'll get that bigger than, last year again as we keep growing.
So on National Night Out, we've had this discussion about, moving it around town. That's not gonna happen this year, right?
Not necessarily, that's still on the table to consider moving it. I
Okay.
wanted to talk to Charlie a little bit, Charlie's here, but I wanted to talk to Charlie a little bit, because we usually coordinate with movies in the park.
Okay.
So there'll be a little bit more movement if we try to do that again
Right.
this year, because of the
Okay.
distance involved, but it's not out of the question. We're just gonna
Okay.
talk about the logistics.
Yeah, I didn't
of it a little
expect it
more.
to happen this year. I know we discussed it a few months back, but I didn't expect it to happen this year.
Right.
As long as it's still in the,
Yeah, it's not even off the
On the
table for
table.
this year, but it may or may not happen, but I don't wanna mess up anything Charlie's doing with Parks and Rec either at the same time.
like in front of the police station, it could be down at
What's
the
that?
base.
Right.
So access. Thank you.
What? Our chaplaincy and translator program is still moving forward. Actually, we kind of completed the backgrounds and everything today on the translator program. So we're gonna start training for both hopefully in June, so we'll have them up and active sometime in June, both programs. We got a lot of applications, what I consider a lot of applications for the translator program. It's done really well. So far, well received.
Hey, Chief, I just had a quick question. I've been approached by a couple of neighbors who are beginning to complain about the noise ordinance and certain neighbors who sort of disobey it. What's the best way to handle that if somebody calls us and says, hey,
Like party type thing?
yeah,
I mean, usually, if they call dispatch, we send the car over. Usually the first time we go there in the night, we give a warning and just ask them to stop. You have to lower it, it's fine. You probably the second time, if it's really been, if the warning's been ignored, we'll issue a summons. We try not to make the residents issue that summons. If we have to go back and say, if they want to issue it the first time, we ask them to issue it because in the sense of fairness, we just try to tell people ahead of time, we've got complaints, can you lower the music or whatever the noise is. But
so if
call
anybody,
dispatch.
so we should just tell them.
Yeah, call dispatch. Usually the second time around, and it happens relatively frequently that they go back a second time. And usually they issue summons the second time around. It's usually almost immediate, as if we just ignore it, as if the call was ignored.
But you're speaking about the second time in the same evening.
Yes, the second time is saying.
What if it's the next week and it's the same,
Yeah.
people and they're still, like how
I
do
mean,
you
that's
do
on a
that?
case-by-case basis. It depends on the situation. I mean, the officers have to actually hear noise that they feel is excessive for them to sign the complaint. And that's somewhat dependent on the circumstances, where it's occurring, what time it's occurring.
But we have time
There's a
limits.
strict ordinance
Right.
regarding the establishments that they have to have their windows closed. If we're talking about licensed establishments that have to have their windows closed and music turned off by 11 or 12 o'clock, whatever the ordinance currently reads, that's just a hard line. But if we're talking about somebody who has a barbecue in their backyard, typically the same officer who's working Friday night this week is not working Friday night next week, so he probably didn't go there twice in a row, because if it's always on the same night, it's not gonna be the same officer 2 weeks in a row. If the person really has a recurring problem, if they notify my office, then we'll put out a notice to our night shift that this is a recurring problem, and to deal with it appropriately. If somebody calls each time and gets a different officer each time, it feels like there's no consistency, because literally is a different officer each time.
Right.
So if it's a recurring problem, it's better if they notify my office, and then we'll put out a directive to deal with it a little differently. They try to be very lenient within reason of that type of stuff. People have parties, people want to enjoy the evening, but they shouldn't do it every evening.
So it's not the residents' level of discomfort, it's the officers' level.
If they expect us to sign a complaint, because we have to testify to what we thought was unreasonable if we sign the complaint.
Okay.
And for us to testify, if they don't feel it's unreasonable and they testify that way in court, the summons would obviously be dismissed, because by the officer's own recollection, it was not unreasonable. However, if a civilian feels it is, that's their right to go to court and testify to it. We don't like to issue summonses without the resident saying they want it issued, because they don't want to be subpoenaed to court necessarily. Then they have to come testify for something that they just wanted the music turned down.
Right.
So, but if they have a recurring problem, if they notify us, then we'll deal with it based on it being
So
a recurring.
we do have an ordinance in place about noise, right?
We do, but the ordinance, we just rewrote it recently, actually, in the last year. The ordinance as it pertains to non-licensed establishments is a little more gray, I think.
It's excessive.
Right, it calls it excessive, it doesn't really have a time limit at all. Excessive for residents could be 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the morning. So what's excessive at 2 in the afternoon is different than what's excessive at
I would think that would be just unreasonable. But if we're talking about even 11:30 at night,
But
on a
again,
Sunday.
but again, it's not like, in the ordinance, it's not written, I don't believe, as a hard line for non-licensed establishments. It's what's unreasonable, and unreasonable is somewhat subjective. As to what's unreasonable to a police officer who isn't trying to sleep compared to a resident who has a 1-year-old baby who is trying to sleep is different. But
Can we look at that ordinance? Can we pull that ordinance?
I understand why it would stay gray. I mean, for me, like I have a neighbor that owns a race car. Some people have band practice now and then, people have parties. I mean, I'm a forgiving person. I understand that people want to live in their community and make some noise, and it makes perfect sense that if something was recurring and somebody was having a real issue, then you would send it to the top so that it's taken care of. But more so what I've seen in communities where you make that a very strict thing, it becomes anti-community, and that's something that I would be very wary of. I think it makes sense that if you have a real problem, you would send it to the top so it's taken care of. I think making it, in other areas where it's become more stringent, it restricts community, it restricts people coming together. I would think it would be better for it to be gray, and then if it's a real issue that is very poignant and happening over and over again, that's when it should be sent to the top.
But then it's subjective.
It's always gonna be subjective. Noise is subjective. Like you said, if somebody has a 1-year-old baby,
Right,
or
but if I
somebody
wanna go to
sleeps,
work
if somebody
the
works
next
night
day,
shifts.
It's at 3 a.m.
Yeah, like, how
Or
would that
the,
be?
or the senior
you know?
citizen, you know, lives next door to
Right.
the young people. who are
It's something we
partying
can
at
just
12
look at.
o'clock.
Yeah.
Yes, let's look at it.
it's worth looking at, but in the meantime,
Yeah.
in the
Just have
interim,
them call the-
in the interim, if somebody has a recurring problem, if they call my office directly during the day and let us know about it, then we'll address it for the next time so that hopefully we can put a stop to it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll send that to everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great.
I can speak to the seniors. Senior Senate representative this evening.
Yes. All right, so, did everybody get the report? Any questions on that? No? Some highlights, we had our Mother's Day luncheon.
It was fun.
We had like 29, people attend. Our next event is our Father's Day lunch, which is going to be on June 14th. So if anybody wants to
Same
come
time,
out.
same place?
Same time, same place.
Okay.
Yes, basically that is.
So Jackie, I don't, and maybe I'm just overlooking them, but I don't get updates and advisements of these senior events. They don't come through our text messages, do they?
Or emails.
Emails? No, it's on the website, like our calendar is on our website of
Okay.
events and stuff.
Is there like an
that.
email list we can be on?
So I think if through the website, because you put all these events on the calendar.
On the
website. So if
calendar.
on the calendar under the community alert system, the notify me feature, not the emergency part, you can subscribe to calendar updates and select the calendar that you want. So if you select the senior
I
stuff.
haven't selected the right calendar.
So yeah, if you
Oh.
select the senior one, because if you need any help with that, let me know, we'll check.
Sounds like a lot of work.
Can't you just call me?
I'll tell you, yes.
Email the
Can you
mayor,
call
council,
each of
let
us?
us know when the events
I'll
are.
send out an
Just knock on my door.
That's all I have.
Thank you.
Yes,
So
yes.
when do you publish it?
We usually do it every 2 months, so the July and August will go out maybe the last week of June.
Just send it.
Okay,
Send it.
sure, I can always email them. Okay.
But you included the report every month, so
Yes,
we should take copies.
so make sure you're here on
I'll-
June 14th.
I'll ask Ed.
Okay.
Take copious.
Friday, June 14th,
June 14th.
noon
Yeah, I
time.
did
Yes.
right there.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Jackie.
Thanks.
Jack.
But I'll start off with public utilities, 2 items for legislation. One of them is the public hearing on the parking ordinance, concerning the alternate side of the street parking. Both that introduction and in the intro up until today, we've been getting some good feedback on that ordinance. We also, in response to some of the public comments that were received at the last meeting, Cliff and I reviewed this. We think we have a solution in terms of an amendment, because there are some streets that have 24/7 essentially parking restrictions, and so if you do alternate side of the parking, how can you resolve that? So we were exploring the idea, and we're going to run it by council, which might require an amendment at the next meeting, and then we'll just push off the final the public hearing on that. But the thought we're having is we just put in a provision that says except for whenever there's parking restrictions, it says except when alternate side street parking rules are in effect. So if there's a no parking restriction on your side of the street, that's temporarily suspended when the alternate side of the street parking rules are in effect. Makes it simpler, covers all the circumstances, and accomplishes the same goal. So we'll chat with Greg about that. If there's no feelings one way or another about that approach, then that's what we'll suggest for the next meeting.
I can think of just like Carroll Court, by the mayor's house, DeForest, Oak Grove, Shrewsbury. Those are really skinny streets.
Well, the forest is no parking in it.
And I'm not quite sure what the restrictions are on Carroll, but it makes
It's
sense.
one side of the other.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, it's east. Okay.
So that would address those, right?
I think so, yeah. I'm just gonna take a nice hard look and make sure that there's not a spot where, there's just nowhere to park on the other side of the road. That's the only thing that I'd love to do, but I should have that finished by the end.
I mean, I imagine once we roll this out, we're gonna have to tweak it along the way anyway, because there'll be other things that we didn't think of, or
Yeah.
neighbors who,
The intention is just to make sure we can sweep the streets. That's the
I
intention.
think the thing with this is we're really gonna have to do a good job of getting the word out,
Mhm.
like, because this is one of the things where people have lived here forever and they're used to something and they're really gonna have their eyes and ears open for it, so.
Absolutely.
Just
And
make sure we
will have to
notify
roll out
everybody.
signage before we do any enforcement and things like that, so it's gonna be a process.
The other piece of legislation is a resolution to appoint a DPW water operator, and that's, again, it's been carried over a couple times because we're still going through the search process and finding someone qualified. So it may be on the agenda, it may go into July.
unless of course that magic person appears.
Right.
That's correct.
On the borough's doorstep.
Exactly.
I would love that.
So I just,
We all would.
we keep that listed on here just so you know that it's coming up, and that's to, again, backfill a position that's vacant. So,
Can I throw one in front of my report?
we'll go for it.
Is that okay? So a couple years ago, for those who are on the council, we did an ordinance to limit Spring Street's parking in front of, I believe it's Tiffany Apartments, just during garbage collection,
Because
2
of the
days a
dumpster-
week.
Because
Right.
the truck that has to go
The
in
garbage
the
truck couldn't make a
dumpster.
turn into the thing. I have a similar issue on Throckmorton at the Prospect Hill Apartments. So I'd be looking to put an ordinance in, 2-day a week. I haven't heard from the leasing yet, our contractor, to tell me exactly what time they get there. I'd like to limit it to as small of a window as possible. So if I can get it between 9 and 10 a.m., I'd like to do that. If it's between 10 and 11, we'll do that. But they're driving up on a property, and it's not just them. As with the Tiffany apartment situation, it was FedEx and it was all the other people too. But we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to help alleviate that situation. Okay. I think most of you guys have seen us out and about over the last couple weeks. We're really trying to freshen up the town. We finished up Broad Street this morning with parking lines, so and yellow curbing. I've gotten feedback from commercial businesses already as it was being done. People were sending me text messages, so I think that's a really positive change, and we're going to make sure that that stays on our 6-month cycle. We also, just today, it's not in the report, we finished the Rainbow Crosswalk on Broad and Mont Street. If you haven't been out there yet, I think it looks pretty good. A couple of you guys have
We were just walking by, it was great.
Yeah, and a lot of positive feedback from people walking by initially, which is really good to hear, because
all the guys who were working hard to get that done also heard that, which I think helps. So, you know, I got to say thank you to Rich Hardy and his crew for really stepping it up over the last couple of weeks, because I've been pushing them, and I know that. So thank you for that.
Well, thank them for us.
Got it. Animal control, I do have to say, I'm very proud of the job that Henry has done recently. He's really been stopping dog waste piles from appearing in certain locations. If you get any information from residents, we are very interested in making sure that doesn't happen. We've spent a lot of time, money, effort on keeping the Navesink River clean, and the easiest way to contaminate it is with dog waste. So please keep that in mind. Johnny Jazz Park, the light was fixed. So if you go out there, all of the lights on Johnny Jazz at Johnny Jazz Park should be working correctly. We needed to run new wires, and it was a process, but we got that done. And the stage was installed for Charlie's Rec event, so we're going well there. I do want to say that in addition to, we do have street signs left. We haven't done any this month. There are 10 or 12 left. We're waiting for the state to finish 35 construction before we actually go out there, and we'll send a team out and knock it out in a day or two. There was, and I will not mention the name of the street, but there was one sign stolen already. They really mangled the aluminum holder, so you know, that will be fixed very shortly.
There's one that was damaged too.
There was one that was damaged. That was an accident. Those things happen. But
Those
this-
are the theft-proof sign holders, right?
Yeah.
And they mangled it.
There's nothing.
They did a really good job of doing it, so I won't mention it, and I do not hope that continues.
All right, they keep stealing them. We're gonna
It's
throw
like
this
that.
cardboard sign with
Exactly.
handwritten Broad Street on it.
We'll just project them.
Yes, there you
A
go.
hologram.
That would be nice. That would be nice. We're out sweeping. I pulled up the miles in May that we swept, 192 miles. I think that's kind of a neat statistic that I can pull up and actually report, so you'll see that coming up. Yeah, and the other thing I think I should mention before I get into water and sewer is that brush pickup for the west side is June 13th, and for the east side is June 20th. That's correct. The ordinance says you can put it out 7 days in advance. Code enforcement has been around. They are issuing citations. I know I got a couple calls and texts today from certain residents, and I know Tommy's been dealing with that. I thank Tommy and his staff for helping us out in that regard. You know, we've got a lot to do, and having this on the schedule really helps manage our timeline.
Could I back up to Johnny Jazz Park? I
Sure.
know, Bobby was working on some graphics for the backside of the sign.
That's correct. That's correct.
Are they in production yet?
I believe they are in production. We have a graphic for just the back of the message board. It's got the silver color that kind of reflects sunlight, so that'll help alleviate that issue. And then we have some more things that we're rolling out as a team with Charlie's input and Z's, of course, input, and I think that we'll be looking to do something later on this summer.
Yeah, because I had emailed you the bio from Ralph Gadd from Johnny
Yes.
Jazz.
Yeah, we can put something together on that. We're just trying to get a good headshot that could be useful. We're trying to print out. We're trying to make us engrave, bring or call in, construct. And the lead time on between getting a good photo and the lead time, it's
Oh, I have a bunch that came from his family. So.
Oh, okay. I'll have
Yeah,
Charlie
I'll-
reach out to you.
yeah.
Perfect. I do want to spend just a minute on water. You know, irrigation meters. I know that we've had a bunch of people in the community do that. If anybody complains, please let them know they're available. Just call our department. The lead and copper plan has been submitted to DEP. They've done an initial review, but it hasn't been finalized yet. We're waiting for that letter. We are meeting all of our you know, our thresholds and our deadlines and everything like that. We are going out, and in the month of June, we will be testing homes for lead and copper. So if you get a call from someone who says, I got this bottle and there's a letter attached to it and I don't know what to do, just direct them my way. The testing sites have changed. We've identified some people who, you know, who meet the criteria a little bit better than we've been using before. And it's a positive all the way around. So I just want to make sure you guys are aware of that, because you may get calls before we do. And then the other thing that I definitely need to bring up is we will be flushing, starting tomorrow night. We are going to hit the east side streets. What's that?
Hydrants?
Hydrants, yes, I'm sorry. We will be flushing hydrants, starting tomorrow night. And we will do Thursday and Friday night, and then we will pick it up again next week. So, as we move through town, I will make sure, Pam has the information so that we can post, notices to people that we're gonna be doing that. As always, just please let residents know to run the water until it's clear, if it's discolored. And the water, and I wanna say this too for sure, that the water needs to be run at a high volume to really clear it out well. So just using your dishwasher, just using your washing machine, just brushing your teeth isn't gonna do the job. You really need to turn on a hose bib, that's about 10 gallons a minute, turn on the tub maybe, that's 5 to 7, and if you can get a bunch of fixtures on at the same time, that's really the best thing to do. And that will clear out the water in a couple minutes. Yeah, you see in my report, I mentioned that we had a couple big sinkholes and some unseen events happen in water and sewer, and that happens all the time, so.
Summer.
Yeah, exactly. So are there any questions or anything else?
I just think well done on that repainting downtown.
Thanks. Thanks. You guys are working on it.
So I have a quick question before you go. So, as you replace all the street signs, what are you doing with the old ones?
Very good question. We have them right now at the DPW garage. They are either inventoried, and I haven't pushed the list up to Z yet, or they are in the process of being inventoried, but that can happen very shortly. Next rainy day, I'll have that done when we say that. And then we are working on a plan, and we'll have.
I hear dollars.
We'll have a proposal for you once they're inventory.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
As in scrap.
He's had a few people
Dollars.
on.
As in selling them. There are a lot
We've
of
had-
time Red Bank would
We've had a
love
lot of
this.
interest in
Absolutely.
purchasing older signs, and we are interested in filling that request. We just have to make sure that it's done fairly and in a way that's not going to cause more of a headache for us. Right? So,
The other item which falls under public utilities, parking, just want to add
Oh,
that.
I'm sorry.
Our parking consultant, who is acting as our parking director, started 2 days ago. Monday he was here. He was attractive. And we also have in the packet included some material concerning an RFP for electric vehicle car share. I sent you 2 samples from 2 other municipalities that have gone through this program. And in order to implement this program, to have an EV car share program in Red Bank, we would have to advertise, solicit some proposals, qualifications from folks, and make a determination as to who gets that, which vendor can do that. And before we do that, I wanted to get your thoughts and feedback on that. We need your okay to move forward with it, because we don't want to expend the energy and the effort on that. So what EV car share is, there's companies out there that sort of like Zipcar, but they focus on electric vehicles and charging stations. So these folks would have cars in their fleet that are electric vehicles. We would be able to solicit companies that can come in and install electric vehicle charging stations in the borough for us at no cost to us. They would be able to be used by anyone from the public, at least some of them would be, and then others are dedicated for their cars specifically. So if somebody does not have a vehicle but needs to rent a car, they could go over to this EV car share spot, pick up the keys or reserve it on their mobile app. Again, we could define the parameters and the specs that we advertise, which kind of give you conceptually how it would work. They pick up the car, drive it around, they can drop it off at another location or drop it back off at that same exact location. So Cliff and I reviewed where we thought, well, we put together the proposals, we got the proposals for you, sent those out, what it would look like. We worked with legal counsel to make sure that that's all good to go as a package and put it out. We thought that we've got 2 good locations to roll this out in initially. The first location is on Bridge Street, just by the train station on the street. We would dedicate 4 parking spaces to that. 2 of them would be open to the public. We would have electric vehicle charging stations for anybody to use, and 2 of them would be dedicated to the EV car show. The advantage of that is its proximity to transit, so it encourages people who don't have a vehicle to be able to just walk right over there and get a vehicle. If you locate it far away, then they'd have the challenge of getting to that. So we thought having one right next to the train station, and also that's an area that is underserved in some respects. Maybe vehicles aren't as common right over there by the train station, and there's some new development coming online over there as well. So people who may not have a car will be able to just go down the street and pick one up from there. The other location that we thought would be great is right between Riverside and what's that street? Brower?
Yes.
Yeah, Brower. And that's a strip between Biravino and the funeral home. We own a strip of parking spaces over there that are not metered and somewhat underutilized. So we thought we could also dedicate some spaces there, and that would also serve folks who are living on Riverside Avenue in the Atrium and the large complexes over there that also might not have a car, and the new development over at the V&A site. So it's within close proximity. They could again pick up the vehicle there and take it out of town and come back and drop it off there if they need. Those are 2 locations that we identified that would be good trial spaces, and then if the program is a success, we can expand it. And so we would like your feedback on that.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, River Center originally looked at a similar rideshare program when Ingenuity was gathering data for the rehabilitation of White Street and Bush Plaza parking lot. So I know they weren't able to incorporate it. So I think this is a really, really great idea. Plus, as an electric vehicle driver, it's always nice to have someplace else you can charge your car while you're out to dinner.
So you're saying you can't vote on this? Is that what you're saying? You gotta abstain?
Oh, no, I can vote on it.
I would say my 2 things are that I would really like our RFP to express that we want to go with a company that is willing to do the public partnership, but also the private partnership to expand it. From what I've heard from residents, I've spoken with residents that state that they use their car so little that they would actually get rid of their car if they had a service like this. And many of them live in buildings where this same program could be implemented privately. So something that I would really like to see for the program to expand is that they're willing to work in a public partnership with us, but also they're a company that's in a position to work privately with certain developments so that they could have the same infrastructure across the board, so that you're not dealing with 2 different companies. So yeah, that was the one thing that I heard on the street. And the other thing that I was gonna say, forget it. That was the main one, basically, was that they could do public-private. And I really think it should be stressed that there should be different levels of cars offered. Economy cars for certain traveling, and then something else that was expressed from people was that, if they're going from here to Asbury, for example, and they're going on a night out, and they're gonna take a car one way, and then they're gonna Uber back, they might be more inclined to take a higher-end car, like a Tesla or something like that. So I would love if something like a John Charger or something was, like a lower-end car was offered, but we were also offering a high-end car just to cover a bit of playing field, just to make sure they have a wide array of cars.
And additionally, it should be an organization that's national, so that, if there's a subscription required, it makes it, it's like having a zip card subscription.
Are there ones
So-
that are national?
We can put all these as part of the evaluation,
The new car
some
share?
things we'll look at, their history, their experience, their regional or national footprint, all that kind of stuff, and incorporate that ultimately into
So I have a
our
couple questions.
recommendation.
Number 1, what, if any, costs do we have up front? Number 2, as far as maintenance is concerned, do we have any responsibilities there? And number 3, what's our liability?
So the first question was cost. I would say the only real costs are initially upfront is our work to put together our work from our time and legal counsel and the review of the RFP process and that work. That's really I would say the only upfront cost. We would make it into and you're right. Actually, the price of that spot, which is a lost spot from potentially our parking inventory. We could structure it though where we are getting revenue back from this vendor. So again, we would evaluate that. So it's an upfront cost that we're dedicating, but we will be recouping something, whether it's a concession fee or some licensing fee. That was your first question. Your second
And
question
with
was
maintenance, do we have any
maintenance.
responsibility?
Again, we could make that into the agreement that they are responsible for the maintenance of the vehicle charging stations as well. And those are all the things that we would evaluate the vendor on. Obviously, we want this little, and then, as far as liability goes, like with most of these things, you put in the agreement, designate and allocate appropriate liability on that party, and.
Well, they would identify us, if they were on our property, they would have to agree to indemnify the borough for any activities that perform on their property. In the same way someone, for example, the concession at Marine Park indemnifies us for anything that might go wrong in that building or their food or anything like that. So we would work the same thing as we do.
And the cost would also be that we're not getting the parking revenue for those spots anymore.
So is that, can we go ahead with that?
Sure. That's good.
Okay.
I'm not sure about that second location you're going to clean up, but
Okay.
I understand your logic, but I don't think that was wrong.
Yeah, if you have some other locations that you think, I mean, let us know. We'll, we want to run them by our new parking director, and we'll fill them out. We're not married to any of these ideas. We just thought that
This is like a trial, right?
Trial.
Yeah.
I'm
So
just
we can
getting
always-
over what Councilman Zickrich had said when they were talking about putting them in the, improvement project that's going on now. That seems like a great spot, but I understand that can't happen anymore, but my brain's kind of stuck on that was a good spot, and then moving it back to that pocket here is very different, so.
How long do we think a trial would be?
There's always East Side lot too. that,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
you-
And that location is identified though, because there's hotels right there, and there are some other things,
Right.
other amenities.
And we have to look to the future.
How long would a trial be, roughly, you think?
I gotta look at the RFPs that we put together. I'm not sure what the time frame is, but I think in order to get anybody who's gonna wanna bid, they need some sort of, you can't just say 6 months, you can't even say a year, right? There's a large cost installing these types of charging stations. So I would say it's probably like a 3 to 5 year agreement, and also state statute, legal counsel on it. State statute has a lot of restriction on certain things, how long you can bid certain things out for. So we'll look at that.
So, and do we know the two models that we got from those two municipalities, whether they have actually implemented?
I believe they have, in those two municipalities, they have implemented, correct.
So then we can gather some info from them if we need to.
Yep.
All right.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you, Cliff.
Thanks, Cliff. Have a good night. Fred? How are you?
Construction activity for May was slower than the previous month, resulting in an increase in the total number of permits issued and total fees collected. But there was an increase in the total completed inspections and an increase in the total certificates of approval and certificates of occupancy issued. It seems like the year is going to be more prosperous than the previous month.
Permit closures.
We're making progress on closing out older permits.
Do we have a number?
There were 59 permits open for the month, there were 135 closed for the month. Year to date, there were 316 open, and year to date, there were 567 closed.
So I would say they're on pay, they're obviously closing out more permits than are coming in. So, given the staffing levels and the complexity of the problem that Fred inherited, I think they're doing a great job. We're not gonna be able to close out all those permits overnight, but I think they're doing a very good job.
No, that sounds awesome.
Well done.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you.
Tommy?
Hey.
Any questions on the report? The only thing I chapter for the multi-jurisdictional mitigation process this month. One thing different about this process is going to be the meetings will be here with us rather than us traveling around to accommodate them. They're gonna accommodate us, kind of works out pretty good. We're going out and start to attack some bad sidewalks, you know, to try to keep them locally in the same area so that we can catch up. We're trying to go out there and do everything at once, give people time to catch up. Like Cliff said with the brush, trying to stay in front of that the best that we can. A little bit of negative feedback, but the only way that this is going to work for us in the future is just to do it the way we need to do it.
Tom, speaking of brush, if somebody has all their brush piled out and then there's some lumber and stuff mixed in with it, is that a bozo no-no?
Yeah, no, it is a no-no. Yeah. That's actually construction debris. Could be it could go to bulk. That Cliff would probably
Yeah,
be
no,
able to-
I just know on my walking route, the next couple of weeks, somebody was gonna pile out there. So I'll talk to you later.
We do the same. So if we see even during, when they're allowed to put their stuff out, if there's construction debris in it, we haven't used the tags rack, but we actually do go up and let them know that they can't, so the guys don't get hurt, our guys get
Yeah,
hurt.
I mean, that's nasty stuff.
But people hide stuff in it, you know, you don't want them to be hurt.
Alright, so give me a heads up on that.
Yeah, and we got our 90-day notice from the state regarding our emergency operation plan, which I already started on, you know, hope to get it done this month, next month, before it's due in August. So it doesn't go between the bed and the wall in the last minute, so.
Alright.
We're putting out the reminders again through social media and on the website about the brush pickup. Again, as Tommy said, it's an education process. They were pretty lenient the last 2 rounds it was, and we've got to just go through this growing pain to get people to understand what the restrictions are, and we're getting there. So,
Yeah, they want to
keep them
explain
busy.
to the reason to get the sweeper out. People appreciate that a little bit more, and then they tend to understand.
Oh, yeah, once they see it, then
Yeah.
they're sort of familiar with it, going by, and then they go
Right.
complain to you guys.
Anything else for Tommy?
Well done, man.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Good evening. So at the last meeting, you all introduced the budget, and by state law, there's a 28-day waiting period for that. And it just so happens that the next meeting is
The
after
28th day?
28th day, or thereabouts, whereby you will be adopting the budget, I'm sure with much public comments and inputs on that. And yeah, I think it's something that we'll be very proud of with the budget that's been put together and vetted by the Finance Committee. There's a COLA bank ordinance that complements that budget adoption at the next meeting. That's really for future consideration for future budgets, to provide a little bit of flexibility if needed. And in terms of the budget itself, it was placed up on the borough's website. It was advertised in Asbury Park Press. There's a nice summary on the website. You can view the document in all its splendor. I downloaded it. And yeah, basic summary of it is that yeah, expenditures have gone up by about 400,000, and we're projecting revenues to decrease by about $500,000, which I think is pretty wise given current economic climate throughout the country. And there's also a $3 million capital bond ordinance investment that was enacted or will be enacted very shortly that will provide some further investment to the borough. And yeah, the other significant detail is there's less reliance on on tapping the parking and water and sewer utility surplus to fund the operating budget. So I think those are all quite positive steps. Yes.
So I want to just elaborate on a few things that Peter was touching on for the benefit of the public as well. So he talked about the appropriations going up by about $400,000. That accounts for mostly salaries and wages. That is our mostly contractual obligations under contract through collective bargaining agreements with the PBA and the CWA, our two primary bargaining units here at the borough. There are contractual raises that we have to abide by. And so that increase is largely comprised of those contractual increases. There is a small increase in the other expenses line. So what does that mean? Well, the state budget, the public document that everybody sees, breaks everything down under your appropriations tab under either salaries and wages or other expenses. We work more detailed on what those other expenses mean. Those other expenses are everything from leases for copy machines to telephone equipment to maintenance agreements to to postage to our advertisements in the paper, professional service contracts with engineers, attorneys, planners. All those things are called other expenses. So we know what they are, but the state doesn't care about what those are. They only ask for what are your other expenses and what are your salaries and wages. So our other expenses typically are more discretionary spending. That is where things like leases and contracts and all that we can negotiate are, but you also have some of them that are multi-year, such as our garbage collection and our tonnage fees and our utilities. I would say for the most part, those are non-negotiable. We don't have much discretion in those. For example, this year we are renegotiating our copier leases. We are renegotiating our postage machine lease. We're negotiating things that we can. And so the other expenses has gone up a little bit, but not significantly. So that's where the 400,000 increase comes from, but not all of it. The other part of it is the reserves. So when our CFO was talking about that amount of money, I want to stress that we put in more money in our reserves this year as well to replenish them. That is discretionary. We can choose to do that or we can choose not to. Those are what I would call rainy day funds, and those are dedicated for a specific purpose. It's not the slush fund. That is for emergencies and snow removal. So you have certain circumstances where the weather, whether it's a hurricane or whether it's a snowstorm, we need to have some money for that above and beyond our normal expenses. We put those funds into a dedicated reserve for that purpose. We also have another reserve that's of note, and that's our accumulated absences. Certain employees over time and based on contract accrue absences, whether it's vacation or whatever the case may be. When they retire, we have to pay them out on that. So we have a reserve for that as well. And then we also have reserves for things like tax appeals. Again, you don't know what's going to happen with those tax appeals and how they go. So that all goes into that $400,000 increase. And I would say that I think that we were very conservative with that, but we were also fiscally responsible in putting that together. On the revenue side, right, Peter said we expected a decrease by about $500,000 in revenue. What does that mean? Does that mean that the borough is not making enough money? I would say that in terms of areas where we are generating fees and fines and revenue, whether it's through the work of permits or licenses, we are on pace with last year's levels, if not slight increase in some areas, and slight decrease in others. But the large decrease in that revenue is actually our reliance on surplus. I want to emphasize that. Because we take money out of surplus every year, that surplus gets replenished every year, but we take money out of that surplus. And the way you do that is by booking it as revenue. So to everyone else, they see, oh, your revenues are going down. But it's actually where you put how much money of your surplus you're using. So that's going down on our revenue sheet because we're relying less on our surplus by quite a bit of money this year. And the purpose of that is to replenish our surplus as well for those years where things may not be as good.
And is some of that cyclical?
I'm sorry?
Is some of that cyclical?
Yes, so
Year to year?
every year you'll take out a certain amount of money in surplus, but it gets replenished because in your budget on the appropriation side is something known as a RUT, a reserve for uncollected taxes. the borough, what most people don't know, is has to budget money for people who don't pay their taxes as well. So when you collect more and you don't use that, that's some of the things that can go back to replenishing your surplus. But if you just keep using the same amount every year, then you're never gonna build up your surplus. So this year, we're using less than we did last year, so that way we can build up that surplus to a healthy level. And all those things help in our debt ratings, with our credit agencies. So when we get interest rates and we can bond, it helps lower and we can improve our fiscal health for the borough. And that's why doing these things is important.
Right,
So,
and on the expenditure side, I mean, we've done an awful lot of technological upgrades between camera equipment and video equipment and video displays like we have on the wall here. So some of that, those modernizations of municipal government also came into play.
absolutely, we upgraded our email, so we're not relying on servers and our own in-house maintenance for some of these things in a day where viruses and ransomware and all these things are coming into play. We've upgraded that. Our voice, we're rolling out voice over IP telephony. So if we have an emergency in this building, like we did last summer, where it was shut down, operations don't have to cease. We can have employees relocate to another building and continue to operate seamlessly. So these upgrades help benefit the public and allow us to continue our operations unfazed. So those are the highlights. Our net valuation taxable, which is what people know as our ratables, went up this year, but we are not getting our final number until June 7th. And so based on the numbers that we're looking at right now, that represents an increase to the average home, that represents an increase on the local municipal tax of about 2.22%. Now, that tax base can go up or down on June 7th, so in 2 days we'll know. So that 2.22 can go up a little bit or it can go down a bit. We don't think it's gonna fluctuate much more than about $10 million. And that has an effect of taking it up to about 2.3, 2.4, or dropping down to about 2.1, 1.9. 2.1, 2.0. So that can change, but we put it at a level where we felt it was reasonable should that fluctuation happen and still keep the borough in a healthy position. So I want to thank Peter for his work on this, all the department heads who they really put up with me in creating a new budget process. This was my first budget process for the borough of Red Bank, so I put that in place and they were all patient with me and embraced it, and our consultants, the interim CFO, Sandra Cooney, and especially the finance committee for your support of this budget.
Thank you, Darren. Very well done. I want to thank everybody who was involved, our auditors, Bob and Michelle Swisher. You guys did a fantastic job. And it was what I envisioned, bringing that increase down slowly but surely with very wise decisions on the appropriation side as well as the revenue side. I think it's so important that we start building up that bank, that rainy day fund for the future years where, our evaluations don't go up as much, or we don't bring in as much revenue. And we may have to switch money from our bank account into our checking account to pay our bills and continue to keep a minimal tax rate increase, through year to year. We want to smooth that out so we don't have herky-jerky, mountains of tax increases of 2%, 5%, 1.5%. We need to smooth that out. And again, I think you guys are doing a fantastic job. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll echo that, but I also thank you both, and I just want to thank Chairman Ballard for his leadership on the finance committee. I know he isn't always the easiest person to get along with when it comes to dollars and cents, and that actually belong to the taxpayer. But his leadership is terrific, and appreciate it.
I also just want to add one last thing, and it's a housekeeping thing with the budget too. As part of this process, and being that it was my first budget for Red Bank, we did a lot of housekeeping in terms of the chart of accounts as well. And somebody who looks at the budget might see drastic increases in one line item, but they've got to look at the budget completely because it's dropping in other areas. And what happened, for example, in public utilities, I'll use public works as an example. They've been traditionally split up into 3 different areas in the budget: streets and roads, stormwater, and buildings and grounds. And we wanted to unify those 3 accounts, so that way it reflects the actual operations of the borough department, that they are, one element, one unit working together, and it makes it less of a fiscal nightmare for them to have to monitor 3 different sets of accounts, and for finance. So we've combined them. So it looks like a large increase, but it's actually decreasing by about the same amount in the other areas. So
what's old is new again.
So just to give people an idea of, you got to look at the budget holistically.
Right.
There are no, drastic increases for any one department.
And we painstakingly went through that during the finance committee meeting.
Yep.
I had a lot of questions about those drastic increases, and how come there's no money in this budget this year? So, again, thank you for putting that gigantic Excel spreadsheet
Yeah,
together.
that's pretty confusing.
Yeah, but it's just what we need to manage our finances going forward.
So what we got on finance?
Yes, thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
Alright, so at the next meeting, we'll have our resolution for the bulk of the liquor license renewals. We had a couple at the last meeting, and this is everybody's last chance to get renewed before their licenses expire on June 30th. Anybody that doesn't get their paperwork done will have to get a permit from the state to operate after July 1st until our next meeting. So hopefully there won't be many of those, but that'll be next meeting. Special events that were approved last Monday will also be on the next agenda, the upcoming scheduling of those. Just recapped on the agenda for you, the summer meeting schedule, just so everybody has it in front of them. June 19th will be our next meeting, July 3rd will be our workshop, 24th will be our regular meeting, August 7th will be the workshop, August 21st will be the regular meeting. And we have, right now, one proclamation on the next meeting for Alzheimer's Awareness Month for the month of June. And I'm sure everyone's aware, last night was a primary election, and candidates on the ballot were completely unopposed, so it's no surprise that the Democratic nominees were Councilman Yangstrom and Councilwoman Horgan as the incumbent, and the Republican challengers will be Michael Clancy and Allison Gregory.
I know I'm last, so I'll try to make it under an hour. The issue report, like normal. And those reports, I kind of like to look at the historical trends of permits. I think it's a good indicator of how the economy, local economy is going to be. Pretty much where we are in the past 2 years, which is about 30% higher than prior to that. So we've been on a little bit of a peak for the past 3 years. As far as number of permits, usually zoning permits are the first things that come in before things get done. So good kind of a look to see how things are going to of course, those transfers, revenues and some increases in revenues and revenues that you just talked about. 2 topics tonight. One is want to talk about impervious coverage. Councilman Yangstrom brought this up, I think, 2 meetings ago. And I tried to summarize a very complex issue, this is non-point source pollution in the Madison River and the PG&E. It kind of related it to the request was to take a look at our impervious coverages in our swimming pools. And I asked Councilman Yangstrom, refer to a report that was done, and the report's entitled Impervious Reduction Action Plan for Red Bank, a unit of Rutgers University that prepared it. Regardless of the name, it says Impervious Coverage Reduction Action Plan for Red Bank. There's really nothing in the report that has impervious cover reduction actions suggested. So what it does suggest, it really suggests 8 different things. And those 8 things are your downspouts and our roof leaders, not to connect them into the street, but to actually let them discharge by your structure and let the water then flow. And as it flows towards the street, utilization of pervious pavement, that's
certain pavements have a porousness to them, that the water can seep through. A lot of people don't like them because of the level of maintenance that's required, sweeping, power washing, and other things to keep those pores open. Rain gardens and bioretention systems, downspout planter boxes similar to let the downspouts run across the lawns and put them into the planter box. Rain barrels, which again is usually on the downspout, they store the water and you can use the water for water use at a later date. Bioswales, stormwater planter boxes, and tree filter boxes. And most of those things are things that, as you see landscape areas throughout the town, especially in parking lots, they're typically curved and elevated above the parking lot. So this does something different. This presses them in that parking lot, at least, and allows the water to flow into them from the parking lots, and then they redescend into the ground, which then filters the water before it, as water travels through the ground into the river, it gets filtered and cleansed. So those are the things that it recommends. Not one thing in there says anything about reducing the impervious coverage requirements in the borough's zoning ordinance, even though the title seems to imply that. And then goes on and says there's 17 sites that all this stuff can be tried out. 13 of those borough school zone, 4 are owned by nonprofits. And they kind of use all those different mechanisms in those sites. There's a lot of things that go into a non-point source pollution to our rivers. Real important are the amount of times we sweep our streets, whether we keep our catch basin clean, whether we have Hooper Scooper laws that are enforced, pet waste, and what type of things we use in landscape chemicals or are used on our lawns. So there's a whole bunch of stuff besides impervious coverages. So then I looked at specifically the question of whether we should do something with impervious coverages in our zoning laws. Both from a broader perspective and then just a back perspective. On a broad perspective, Red Bank is what we call a regional center in planning jargon. Typically in a regional center, you want to centralize or have growth in the compact area. Red Bank is what we are. To the extent that you limit those things through land use controls, you might have less growth. And while that might sound good as far as reducing runoff, what it often does is just pushes the runoff and growth to other areas in the region. And usually those areas are less efficient at dealing with environmental issues and engineering things to reduce those effects. The other thing I looked at is we've had our laws on the books for a long time regarding our coverages. And many properties are at the limit of what's allowed in those coverages. So if we did it just an across-the-board reduction, what we see is a lot more action in our zoning board, a lot more applications for simple things like sheds, pools, additions, decks, and patios to now require a variance to get approved. So we see a lot more applications that come before my office instead of getting approved administratively, have to go and take variances from the zoning board for these relatively minor additions. So I would not recommend across-the-board reductions in our coverage requirements, but I did provide 4 things that I thought would make sense, that were a bit more specific and had generally more multiple benefits. One was to incorporate those things from the records report in new parking lots of a certain size. Maybe not all of them, but at least some of them. So the new parking lots might use some impervious pavement, might have the bioswales, might have the pressed planter boxes. So that's one item. The other is to try to provide some zoning incentives for new roofs. Haven't quite determined exactly the best way to do that, but I'm sure I can figure out a way, if you like the idea, to try to come up with that to give some incentive for new structures to utilize and to remove. The other one we talked about in the last meeting was prohibit pavement anywhere other than a driveway. We have a few properties around town that people have paved areas of their yard, which one is not attractive, and two often leads to them parking on it where they're not supposed to, and then we have to enforce our parking rules.
Especially in the storm.
Yeah, it's a big problem.
And then the other one is that again, we talked about it the last time, is we require paved driveways now. To simply not require that, and maybe incentivize other than paved driveways. There's stone, there's the concrete tire treads that look especially nice in the historic district that were used in a lot of years past.
There's bricks and pavers and a green grass strip up the middle of the
Yeah.
drive.
So that would be my suggestion, is to do those 4 things rather than an across the board reduction that one wasn't even called for in the report, and two, just would cause some problems. People would not be able to go to zoning board and shut up. That's what I would suggest, and if you like some or all of those, we can try to come forward with some rules.
I have to say, I like your proposals. I mean, we spent a lot of time on it. I know this is a passion of Councilman Langstrom's, and I think that those suggestions could be incorporated into the ordinance. Currently, the Borough Stormwater Ordinance regulates projects which are more than 1 acre of disturbance, or more than a 1/4 acre of new impervious coverage. My recommendation is that Red Bank reduce the threshold from 1 acre to perhaps a 1/2 acre, because there are a few projects which really exceed that 1 acre size, and possibly reduce the amount of impervious cover allowed. And let's look at the stormwater management ordinances and evaluate the impact for reducing the size of major developments, since most projects in Red Bank, as I said, are less than 1 acre. This would require more projects to implement a water quality improvement, even if they exceed the impervious service requirements. And in section 49107, which refers to major development, and we changed that to a smaller side, which the DEP would probably allow us to do, then we capture more projects which have to improve their sites for water quality. It will not directly reduce the impervious surface, but it will indirectly help, because developers may try to reduce coverage so that they can meet stricter standards. And then one of the few benefits of this change is that it does not make existing properties non-conforming. It only affects new development or redevelopment. And that being said, maybe we should institute some other policy change to cast a wider net to create or protect our impervious surfaces to help improve water quality in the Navesink River and further enhance the borough's stormwater management plan. As you can tell, I spent a little time digesting what you sent.
I was hoping you could email me too. So,
I just, and I looked at some stuff that they've done out in Seattle. I know some other municipalities in New Jersey have done some of this stuff. So those are my suggestions and recommendations.
I mean, my whole thing is, and I've spoken to you about this many times, is I walked around the historic district and I see a bunch of houses, this blacktop in front of them. And I know we talked about how that's kind of a gray area, but they're blatantly violating the rules of parking. So whatever we can do to kind of fight that.
I agree with Councilman Zippich. In addition to the impervious surfaces, it's really a stormwater management issue, because we're on 2 rivers, right?
Very much
So it's really stormwater management. The impervious surfaces, if we could lower that'd be great, but the stormwater management is really what's polluting the river, so.
and that's really the recommendation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's, I think, really what we're looking forward to do.
So I think what I'm hearing is the items I suggested, plus the items you suggested.
Yeah.
There's no downfall to incentivizing green roofs.
I agree, Kate. I think that's a big plus. It's a bonus for us.
Yeah, some of the items you suggested are more engineering related items, so we can bring our engineer involved with engineering. And thank you, Councilman, would you be able to email me the things that you just mentioned?
Sure.
Please, can you call them? Thank you. The other thing I wanted to mention was opportunities, once we had this on.
Your hour's almost up.
I was gonna hand stuff out, enjoy it. Real takeaways. It has nothing to do with zoning. Because a lot of people say, hear the word zone and they feel it has something to do with zoning. And,
What is this?
That's paper that can get handed around. I'll put it this way.
Catch yourself.
What the heck?
So that's a New York Times article that came out, and I thought we could summarize it well. And the other thing is, this zone is a zone in Red Bank.
You've really exceeded your paper allowance
Yeah, I did.
for the year.
And,
That's okay, he's a planner, he needs maps.
And people sometimes ask, why did you guys come up with this map? Well, we didn't come up with this map, the federal government did. These are census tracts. So this covers approximately a quarter of the southwestern portion of the borough. And it's a census tract, which is a U.S. Census designation, Census Tract US. And this is really a program that we're seeing and hearing is having some impact, but it's really just something you do on your federal tax return. So it has very little to do with the municipal government, but the effect has a lot. And it's really capital gains tax incentives. And there's a deferral of capital gains tax. There's a discount on your capital gains tax, on your on old capital gains tax, and there's an exclusion for new capital gains taxes. So it really does have quite a bit of a financial incentive for investors to invest in this area. We did offer a seminar that we put on the River Center a couple months back. Councilman Zipperich and Councilman Yasin attended, and we had a good turnout.
Yeah, it's a packed house.
Yeah, it was a packed house, had a nice feel to it.
I mean, the main impact is just on the capital side, with that helping them raise funds. There's no impact on zoning or restrictions.
And I think there were some discussion items on ordinances, and I know Councilman Ballard asked me about planning board and referrals, and we canceled a couple of planning board meetings. They should be ready for you next. Planning board meets, I believe, Monday, and the council Wednesday. And I think we talked about all those ordinances that are on there.
We do have a similar ordinance that either June or July we worked before, that's similar to the news racks, the drop boxes. I had a meeting with our attorney on that one before this. So we want to regulate the drop boxes as well that are in the right of ways and scattered throughout the borough. There's a resolution for bond release, and we'll keep Glenn here for two other items. One of them is the Dental South Bank project. We received a letter from their attorneys on that one. South Bank is the project that is off Boat Club Court down by Marine Park, sort of in front of on the Boat Club, behind West Front Street. So they were before the Board of Adjustment, correct?
Yes, they were recently, last meeting, they were approved the Board of Adjustment. The resolution of approval is on Thursday, tomorrow night. Essentially what there's a right-of-way behind Front Street. If you know the new cigar place that opened up on the corner.
Yeah, behind Playa Balls and all.
Yes, behind Playa Balls, exactly. There's a 20-foot municipal right-of-way. It's kind of like a no man's land right now. People park on it. It's kind of half paved, half not paved. People put their trash out on it. It's just a bit of a no man's land. But when this project goes in, there's this kind of front door now, this right-of-way. So the applicant is basically, as part of the approval, is required to fix that road and make it into a nicer road, some curbing, a new pavement, and they're doing some parking off of it.
Right, because all of those buildings, those are sort of the back doors to all of the
Yes.
Front Street buildings.
That's correct. And so the zoning board required them, because the zoning board can't require them to do stuff in the right-of-way. You guys control the right-of-way. So the zoning board can only suggest it, and suggested they come to you and ask that certain things be done. And so they did. So they suggested that there be a no parking restriction. And that's, somebody prepared an ordinance. I'm not sure who prepared it, but somebody prepared an ordinance for a no parking restriction on this road. And I guess my only suggestion is, it makes sense, because you literally couldn't pull out of their parking spots if there's cars parked on the other side. Now, there certainly might be some negative reaction to the businesses that currently use this area as kind of this no man's land to do their parking, but there just doesn't seem to be any other way to make it physically work back there without those parking restrictions.
So that's why, as part of one of the other requests, which is, or one of the other elements of this is that they're putting parking in the front of their property. Some of those parking spaces are going to be dedicated to the borough for public use. So in exchange for putting that no parking lane, there's now going to be, organized parking in front of their building. And of those 3 spaces dedicated to the public that we can then meter or regulate however we want. So,
Are there trash enclosures behind any of those storefronts?
There are,
Yeah.
yes, there.
Will this access road be big enough for those trash enclosures?
it's not gonna change the size of the road. The road is still staying the same, so if they're able to make it back there now, it's not gonna change that. If anything, the improvement.
Because it's kind of a big open parking lot, right?
Yeah.
You've got fencing, a hill, you've got some obstructions there. But what they're gonna do is put parking in the front, so it actually is going to improve that right of way and the navigability of that right of way. You can make a K-turn there now, you can go into that spot and back out.
I guess the reason I asked the question is because if there are trash enclosures back there, does that dedicated lane, will it be big enough for a trash vehicle to get back there and move it up?
They're gonna put the parking, so if the road is like this now, they're going to put it on their property, the parking space in their property. So the road now, the place where you'll be parking isn't on that road, it's actually onto their property, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it was 8 spaces, right? When I looked at.
When they're looking to offset us from moving spaces with it.
Yeah, because the spaces, we calculate that there's really only about 3 vehicles that
Yeah.
really park in that area or are
Yeah.
parked regularly, so they can be offset by putting it on their property, and they're willing to do that.
So I think it's a tight spot as it is. I think we should
Yeah, this
grant it.
makes that, I think it improves that,
Yeah.
that right of way by doing this.
You may want to consider timing of this. If you do this now, you would essentially be saying you can't park there now, as the people currently do. You may want to tie this, just do a basic.
Tie it to when their spots open. Yeah, I agree with that.
Or close to it. So it might not just be the right time to do this. Either you can do it now and not enforce it, I guess, or you can just wait till next. Or you can just do it and enforce it.
Put a sunrise provision in there, it's just hard to
It's a
get
big,
children there.
I mean, it's a fenced-in parking lot, right?
No, that fenced-in parking lot is where the development's actually going to be built. It's the road between that fenced-in parking lot and the backs of the front street.
Oh, it's like a little.
It's a lane, like it's a skinny lane.
The road is generous, it's mostly an alley.
That's why I say
Yeah,
you're.
because, yeah, I got it.
That's why I say take that spot
It's
and
sort of
widen it
curved
down.
right now, and then there's the big gravel parking lot.
Correct. So that's why I say this is gonna be an improvement to that. And so what we would need by way of legislation, and Greg will work with their attorneys to do, is we would have an ordinance to restrict the parking. We would have, the easements would be done by ordinance, or those easements would be done by resolution, one or the other,
I
but
believe we would do them by
ordinance. So there's gonna be access because, and there's gonna be doing some improvements, and they're gonna then be dedicating and giving us those spots. So, that would encompass those easements. And then the other one is that this right of way has no name. So, they made a request for a name. That one is not critical at this point because, it's not gonna affect the construction, or it's not a condition of their approval. So really the priority is the 2 ordinances.
What's
slash
the
resolution.
name?
South Bankway.
I think we should definitely move forward with the.
Yeah, I think we should take a little
Yeah.
time to think about it.
I don't think
because
we
it's
get-
not every year that you get the name of the street, so.
Oh, that's a good point.
Listen, I think we need to put a little more thought into it if we're gonna do that.
Better way.
So, that's really it in terms of those items.
Yes,
Then-
move forward.
Okay. And then lastly, is the idea of amending our ordinances to allow food trucks on private property, with restrictions, obviously. So not everywhere, but there's certain properties that are maybe underutilized or been in, let's say, over on Riverside, you've got the gas stations over there. So these buildings really have nothing going on right now because either the projects are stalled, they're in bankruptcy proceedings, or maybe you've got properties in the evening hours that have large parking lots, but could benefit from maybe allowing, food trucks over there. But right now, our zoning ordinance does not allow that. So sort of like we did with allowing places to rent out or lease out their parking lots, we put together some restrictions, parameters on where that would be allowed and when and how that would be allowed. My idea is that we explore this a little bit further because it can help the community in terms of the economy and also making Red Bank yet another area that is attracting new emerging businesses. So there are a lot of food trucks that are interested in coming to Red Bank and doing business in Red Bank, but they have no mechanism by which they can do that.
I'm all
So.
for it.
I'm all for it, and if they clean up the properties that are dilapidated, because nobody wants to go to a food.
They're not gonna sit in weeds trying to sell food.
Right.
We've had private businesses in the past, I mean, even located on Monmouth Street that are successful businesses in the past that wanted to have food trucks park in their lots and they were not successful because we didn't have the ordinances supporting that. I remember Teak at one point was interested with partnering with the Cinnamon Snail, if I'm not mistaken, but they were prohibited from doing something like this. So it's a great move, and I also think we have multiple food trucks that actually live in our town. Two very prominent food trucks that live here. So it would make sense that we have residential small business owners that live here. We should be giving them the opportunity to operate here. So they're not going to Asbury Park or Gateway National Park in Sandy Hook to operate. They should be able to have a way to navigate that in their own town.
They should go to Gateway National Park, because Hurricane Sandy, there's nothing out there. So food trucks are important in Sandy Hook.
So, if that's okay with you guys, then I'll ask Glenn to draft up an ordinance that we can speak.
Yeah,
over the
has
next
anybody
couple of
discussed it with River Center at all?
Not yet. The topic hasn't gotten to that point yet because I didn't know how you guys felt first, so I didn't want to go down there, open up that can of worms yet. But obviously, the idea of food trucks is on their mind because the Marine Park renovations did account for a food truck plaza, and also the areas that I think, based on how this would work out, really aren't going to be in the River Center area, within their jurisdictional boundaries. But if we can talk to them if you think that we should move forward with this ordinance.
Well, yeah, I would suggest that we bring it up at the next board meeting with them. So we get their reaction.
I think we want to move forward, so.
Just for clarification, it wouldn't be in their boundaries?
It may, I'm just thinking in terms of the properties, right? What has large enough spots? So we're talking about private property. So I don't know that within their jurisdiction that there are many private properties that can host food trucks within their jurisdiction. The immediate ones that come to mind are like the abandoned gas station over on Riverside. There aren't that many properties within the River Center boundaries that would follow that kind of model. But that's not to say they don't exist or aren't there. So certainly talk to them.
Hospital parking.
That's right.
I'm gonna offer you, I've heard everybody say how great this is, and so at the risk of being a total contrarian, I'm gonna offer you a different opinion. One is that certainly your brick and mortar businesses often object to food trucks. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, that just means you should expect an objection. Two, sometimes when you provide a financial benefit to properties such as abandoned gas stations, they might have a tendency to stay abandoned more because now there's a revenue source from the property. So rather than that person hurting and keeping that abandoned, which you've done stuff to make it hurt more through abandoned property ordinances, now all of a sudden there's a benefit. Now they can just go benefit from renting these to food trucks. So they might end up having a financial incentive to stay abandoned, period. The third item is it's sometimes hard to plan for these things, depending on how haphazard you want it. For example, using the same gas station, it's pretty small. And if you put 3 or 4 food trucks in there with all the other things that are currently on the site, a little tough to, for a lot of cars to come in and park and people to go to. That particular one is not that friendly for walking. And the other option is to do things on public property. You have parking lot here, when you're not using it, and maybe the Count Basie isn't using it, so food trucks, you have both the park that you're planning, the new park, the rehab park that you're planning on putting in, and then the Count Basie park. And without allowing them elsewhere, you somewhat have a monopoly situation on food trucks, which might not be a bad thing as far as. So that's at the risk of going against what you all thought. That was just
No, it's important to have that
I think those are valid
perspective.
points.
some contrarian thoughts.
The first point with the brick and mortars, what I would say is when we're looking at comparable towns of innovation and looking at, building a day experience for our town, if we want somebody to come and kayak in the morning, spend $10 on lunch, maybe $130 on dinner, I'm not gonna choose to go to a food truck over going to Teague for dinner. I see that as supplementary into the full experience in
And I
town.
think most times when these are allowed, that is the experience. And if you look at any studies, that seems to be what the limited amount of empirical data would seem to suggest. That they're really not taking business away. They're on the
Supplementing a
whole.
day experience and
Yes,
then
there's other. They're bringing more people in, and there's more people coming in or as apt to spend the money in a food truck, and some will spend the money in brick and mortar places.
Yeah.
Having very little impact one way or the other on your brick and mortar restaurants. But it's just there's a perception from brick and mortar places that almost always objects to these things. So it's more of a cautionary tale to kind of have that expectation and maybe have some answers to those criticisms if you want to do more food trucks, whether it's public or private.
For your concern about the abandoned property staying abandoned, can we tie some property maintenance requirements to them to allow them to have those food trucks on it?
I'm
Just
sure
say
that was my point.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure you
Clean it
can
up.
craft an ordinance
Yeah.
in any fashion.
So at least has to look, yeah. it has to look
Obviously, the
proper.
more stuff we require, the less likely we're gonna have.
And then
food trucks.
maybe how many food trucks can be on a certain parcel of land based on size?
Something.
These are all things that, I mean,
Yeah.
yes, they're concerns that Glenn raised, but, I could, with that idea, there's a couple others that I think counter all of those, right? So, exactly, limit how many, that's why I said based on lot size, that's why I didn't think that, like a Broad Street, the traditional, what you think of where River Center's made up of, you're not gonna have lots that large to accommodate that. That's one of the reasons. The other thing that you said, how do you tie in? So I think that this incentivizes them. And, a lot of the properties that become abandoned, a lot of them get abandoned because of financial reasons. The developer either did not anticipate all the costs or bankruptcy or whatever the case may be, funding. So take, for example, the parking lot. They're in bankruptcy court. I don't think they feel dilapidated because the people don't just necessarily care. Yes, that's maybe not their highest priority, but they also, that's not their focus. They don't have the funds for it. So one, you can tie that in, incentivize them, you can make some revenue. And if they're getting in money and they say, well, you know what, I can remove these pumps, right? Remove this abandoned signage because now I'm getting revenue, they may be more likely to clean that up. So, yeah, I think you can counteract all of those by how you craft that ordinance.
Well, what Glenn and I have talked over the months about what they've done in Minneapolis. So as microbreweries open up in neighborhoods that are being adaptively reused or redeveloped, there are parking pads outside the breweries for the food trucks to pull up onto because microbreweries are not allowed to serve food. So they make accommodations for food trucks adjacent to, and you can bring your own food in while they're same thing. Brew.
Actually brought up a totally different topic that I put on here. Actually about distilleries. As I understand it, they have distillery laws similar to have brewery laws where we have Red Tank where they brew stuff and then they serve beer. There's another one that was recently approved. There's actually a second one on White Street that was approved 3 years ago. Hasn't yet, but they basically brew the beer, they sell the beer in the front, they might sell out there, some out the back. We came to when we used to do these committees, we came to the committee some years ago, and said, this is kind of a tough zoning determination, because is this a retail use similar to a bakery, where you bake the goods and sell them in the back and sell them in the front, and maybe you sell some wholesale out the back? Or is it a whole different, like a manufacturing use that wouldn't be permitted? And when we came to you, as the subcommittee, we said, well, probably if you can make it a retail use, we like this idea, so go ahead. And we did that. That's how Red Tank got approved. Now we're having the same issue now with distilleries. We're getting some interest in distilleries. I was just kind of checking back with you to make sure you still want to kind of have the same approach with distilleries as we did with breweries, which classify them as a retail use.
There was recently a special ruling from the ABC also that it's happening in all the towns where these breweries are opening and functioning almost as bars, circumventing some of the laws. So they recently put out a special ruling where they can't have more than 25 events per year, such as like live bands, trivia nights. They're doing them every night adjacent to bars that are paying a lot of money to have liquor licenses. So they're kind of curbing that back, maybe trying to make them more of a legit brewery rather than a retail bar. So it's kind of a problem in downtown areas where they're paying much, much less to operate in essentially a very similar way, which really the only difference is they can't serve food, but the people order in and have it delivered, so it doesn't make a difference.
Get it from a food truck. So
There's actually, food trucks are mentioned actually in this as well.
I just kind of wanted to see if you had a problem with doing distilleries, kind of like the zoning as we did breweries. It seemed like it was very similar concept. Any issues?
I enjoy Asbury
No,
Park,
it's
so
all
great.
All good, man.
The only difference that seemed to me was when I was on zoning board, something that I found interesting was that because it's being classified as the same thing, it's being treated as if the traffic of the business is the same. And that seems to be the only trip up for me, is that the traffic of a bakery is extremely different than the traffic and the visiting of a brewery. That's the only difference that I really saw, is that I would think that's more comparable to a restaurant than a bakery. And I don't know how we sort that out, but as somebody who has worked in that capacity, you know, I know 1,000 people going down the door at Carton every day. I don't think there's 1,000 people going in and out the door at a bakery. So that's the only difference that I really see, is that and the amount of parking.
I think the difference is between Saturday night and Sunday morning.
It's just it's a larger
Saturday night, I have
capacity
a lot of people
project.
going into the brewery, and then
Well,
Sunday morning, a lot of
when
people go to the
you're
bakery.
when you're talking about a brewery, you're having minimum 2 people on brew staff, and that's 1 head brewer and 1 assistant. You're gonna have a tour manager, because you have these tour guides that are mandatory. So you have a tour manager, then you have at least 2 people behind the bar. That's your minimum staffing, is you're already at 7 people. I haven't mentioned a manager or anybody else. And then you're looking at your staff, that's completely different than a bakery, you know, what you're looking at demand-wise.
I use the bakery as a retail example that has
Yeah.
some similarities. So we're really just considering a retail. You know, they're selling beer basically, and they allow quote-unquote tasting of their product.
And a bakery uses some of the similar ingredients.
You know, it's like I say, from a zoning perspective, I could certainly call it either way, but I just did want to check. You know, I don't want to do stuff that is out of sync with the designers. So we all, I can't.
All right.
Okay.
What'd you say?
Your point's well taken, but if we call it retail, it's just.
Right, no, I understand. It's just, it's rough, everybody's navigating it at once. We don't ever wanna be, what I wanna make very clear, I wanna say this on record, is that we are not anti-business, and that includes breweries. We don't want our breweries in our town to feel like we're not supporting them. And right now, with everything that's going on, there's a lot of gray areas, a lot of people that are feeling, you know.
Well, keeping it retail makes it better for us, right? Yeah.
And I'm continuing to try to support our breweries.
Like right now.
That's a lot of time.
Go support them.
Thanks, Clint.
Yeah, thanks, Clint.
Now, President, nothing for executive. I think that comes with all the reports, I'm sorry.
Public comment? All right, public comment, anybody?
There's no exec.
I'll bring this souvenir with me. Do I get to sit down? How's this done?
Wherever you want to do.
I'll just pop it over here.
It didn't sell on eBay, huh, Mr. Laratano?
No, it did not. I must have set the price too high. Okay, well, I have to admit,
Just stay there.
I have two copies here, one which I will read off and one I'd like to enter for a record. Is that possible? For document? Okay. As you are aware, I've appeared a few times in front of the council with very little time to speak. And as you know, the last time I was in front of the council, I brought a document with me concerning the lead and copper testing plans of the town. And that as a result of research that I had done, I believe that there was some very serious things that had to be discussed. Now, since I submitted those documents, I haven't heard not a peep from the town. I haven't gotten a letter of any kind saying, thank you for bringing this to our attention, we will look into it, or anything of that nature. So that forced me to come here tonight on short notice. And what I brought here is basically some documentation which I got from Oprah requests. And I understand that Public Works had made a presentation about their lead testing program here. So what I'm going to do very quickly is just go over this document, it's not very long, and bring out some very important points.
I just want to let you know
Yes.
that the 5-minute.
Oh, there's a 5-minute on this too?
Is this meeting too, yeah, all public meetings.
Well, you know, see, the issue is that I've been bringing this up, and it's not old, it's not new news, it's not new business. It's old business that's been going on for over 2 years.
So 5 minutes should be enough.
No, this really is not enough.
Well, Mr. Laratano.
But the question is,
Why
Mr.
is that
Shahadi,
20?
the question is, Mr. Shahadi, is why haven't I received any response to what I presented to the council a month or so ago?
Because you filed a complaint against the town.
Yes.
We're not gonna discuss anything with you.
Oh, so what are you gonna do?
We're gonna let you talk in a public meeting, and then we're gonna let you go sit back down.
And what are you gonna do about the complaint?
I'm gonna answer it.
When? Okay, well, I'm gonna go over this. This is the first page of a lead and copper sampling plan which was submitted by the Water Department in March of 2017. This was 4 months after the Water Department pulled up this lead and galvanized pipe from my front driveway. The second page of this document is their declaration of lead service lines or goosenecks for the plant, and it says 0. The Water Department declared that there were 0 lead goosenecks water pipes in use in Red Bank. That is the plan that they submitted back in March. This document here is an email from the DEP to Tom Branch of the Water Department that it says here, which I have in a bracket, I noticed that the sampling plan that you say you have consulted records from 2017 to 2018, and that is probably why you haven't found any records of lead service lines or goosenecks. Oprah requests have had success when pulling files from the early 1900s. Oprah records they're referring to are the Oprah records which I received through the town clerk. And I submitted those to the DEP about 2-3 weeks before this email appeared from the DEP to Mr. Branch. Then Mr. Branch says in this email here, Nicole, who is the contact at the DEP, thank you. But I believe that due to the lack of records available, we may have to develop an alternate strategy. We are attempting to retrieve building records through the Edmunds software system. That is another email from Water Department. And then the DEP says, hi Tom, from what we have seen, it has been demonstrated that these records do exist. Permits for water prior to 1960 have been OPRA'd and have returned results with lead goosenecks/lead bends. The purpose of the materials evaluation in your sampling plan is not just to obtain 60 standard and 30 alternate sampling locations, but to ascertain where the most vulnerable service connections and homes are within Red Bank. That is another email. And then Mr. Branch says to Nicole, now mind you, their first assertion was there was no service lines in use.
Nicole, as you and I have been discussing, we have reviewed approximately 4,000 individual water service records, of which 465 indicate lead materials having been installed as far back as the early 1900s. We are evaluating which of these services are still in use by reviewing more recent installation records and contacting current owners via email. As this has been quite time-consuming, Red Bank is requesting an extension of time to include appropriate Tier 1, meaning single-family homes, in its lead and copper cycling plan. Yeah, you really are good at timing things. This is a very important public matter. All right, so there's another document here. This is the updated sampling plan, which instead of saying 0 lead goosenecks, it says 290. Now that is the minimum that they had found. There may actually be more. So the point of all this is that I had made this complaint because the documents say that the material that was supplied to the DEP was fraudulent, that they knew in advance that there were lead pipe in use in the town. The DEP did not know it until I pulled up the Oprah records to show that yes, the town had the records, the town could not even look for them on their own, and me, as a local resident, I had to go find Oprah records myself and find the information for them. And so now what is the DEP doing? They're hand-holding with the municipality instead of issuing a notice of violation, which is what they should have done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Wait, your phone.
He wasn't supposed to, he stayed.
All right. Name, just name and address.
Hi, my name is William Poku, 90 Bank Street. Gotta refer to my notes, sorry. All right, you wanna start the timer? It's been on already. All right. I've got 5 points here that I want to bring up. The first one is it's a church on the southwest corner of Bank and Layton. And every time it rains, you have what pretty much could pass for an Olympic swimming pool. The water just does not drain. In the winter, you really can't cross the sidewalk. Bank and Layton.
Thank you.
Yeah, can't cross the sidewalk in the winter. And the pastor of the church learned about the Red Bank NAACP, and he approached me, and I assured him I'd bring it to your notice. In the summer, it becomes pretty much a breeding pool for mosquitoes. Second issue I have is that Mr. Cano and I are in court. And one of the issues that came up in a brief that he submitted one day late was that the Greater Red Bank NAACP has not participated in housing discussions in this town. And I'm basically here to address you that that is not true, because I am the secretary of the Greater Red Bank NAACP, also the chair of housing. And I want to bring it to your attention that one time Reverend Davis asked me to attend one of these meetings, and I tried to get the location of the meeting from Mr. Shihadi. He wouldn't tell me about it. And it turned out that I met Mr. Glenn Carter, who was here earlier, and I was questioning him downstairs about where the meeting was. Mr. Shihadi came down and shouted at me that I was not supposed to talk to any of the borough employees, and I shouldn't be asking about his whereabouts. I just want to understand that I have gone to the national organization of the organization in Baltimore. We're structured in this manner. We have the national organization, and then we also have a state conference that takes care of all the state NAACPs, and then there's the local unit, which Greater Red Bank is. So Greater Red Bank is basically based here, right here in Red Bank. And our jurisdiction goes from Aberdeen, Rumson, Fairhaven, Little Silver, Middletown, Cold Snake. I'm sorry. Sorry about it. Yeah. So Mr. Shihadi may not know. And the last time that I approached the council, Mr. Cannon read to me a section in your settlement agreement that required that the Greater Red Bank NAACP should be one of the interested parties in all these negotiations. And I asked him what address that he sent any notices or whatever the borough was doing to, and he was unable to tell me. He did say that he was going to inquire from somebody else, and since then I have not heard anything from him with that respect. So basically, whatever was supposed to have been sent and that we did not receive, I would appreciate getting it, because I am the chair of the Housing Committee of the Greater Red Bank NAACP, and I need to understand what has transpired. How much am I doing on time? 1 second?
40 seconds.
40 seconds. All right. Fourth point. Mr. Zipprich talked about tweaking of the ordinance, that the ordinance first introduced might not have all the nitty-gritties in it, and eventually you probably have to tweak until you get a sweet spot. Concerning alternate side parking, for instance, there are some places in the borough that have handicapped people. As a matter of fact, Tilton is one example where the handicap sign is marked in front of somebody's house. So when you talk about alternate parking, what's going to happen with that handicapped person? Is he going to be exempted? Right? I am a caretaker of a disabled person. That's also handicapped. Am I going to be exempted? You go through town and you see certain places where people are parking on sidewalks and it's never enforced. Okay, so what it appears, and I've seen on social media where one person says all this just to get Poku to move his truck. So I put my truck on my property. They say you can't park the truck on the property. You put it on the street and they say you can't do that either. It's like you can't have it both ways, folks. There are people that have come into this town and have an HOA. They're living in cages like sardines in a can. And they see existing properties where people are living a freestyle, putting out front yard gardens, enjoying their property. And they want everybody to start living like they're in HOAs. You see some of them come out here and complain. And whenever they see what you call work being done for improvement, what do? They call the police. They drive screws into tires, let air out of tires and all that. And Mr. Cannon was told about this in front of Judge O'Brien, and he said it needs to stop, but it is not. Right here, I have an affidavit of somebody that says that they cleared the snow in front of my house, and then Richard Hardy of the borough took up a bobcat, picked up snow, and came back and dumped it there. Now that's me.
Suzanne Viscomi, 25 Cedar Place. I just want to follow up because Mr. Rotunda didn't have enough time. On the report that he mentioned for the inspection of water, the primary goal is to inspect single-family homes. And going through the list of, 60 or so addresses, we had a funeral parlor, we had this building, we had teak. We didn't have exclusively single-family homes. We do have a lot of single-family homes in town that should be tested. And also there was clusters. John Street, there was a cluster. There wasn't that many testing if you go west versus east, of course. So I just want to keep in mind that how we test, that we test the entire town equally and not test funeral parlors or companies that it's supposed to be to test the single-family homes, which if you look at the report, it was, even some addresses didn't even exist, we couldn't even find on the tax rolls. And we do have a listing of them all, so it's kind of interesting how we tested a place that we couldn't even locate.
So for the public's benefit, for the public record, thank you. The lead and copper sampling plan does not test your individual home water. They go around the entire water system and they tap it at certain locations to test for these contaminants, copper and lead, which are dangerous to
You're
humans.
wrong, absolutely
Yeah,
wrong.
excuse
You're-
me.
That's bull.
The information that's been read out loud
Read the
tonight in the
facts.
meeting is a draft report in which the DEP and your engineer or whoever's in charge of your water and utility determines the testing samples based upon the age of your system and numerous other factors that are in the DEP regulations.
Do you have only
Mr.
5 minutes?
Excuse me,
Larratanda?
Mr. Larratanda.
So, as you know, under the ordinance, everyone's service line from the main to their house is the resident's responsibility financially. And so anyone in the town, at any time, can go right to Home Depot, and the people who test water are standing right in the front. I mean, more than happy to come to your house and test it if any resident here is concerned about lead or copper in their water or their personal service line. However, the town's sampling is not designed to test the individual quality of the water in individual houses. It's meant to test an overall contamination of the system. at
You are
various
wrong.
sites. So
Read-
that's-
read the rules, read the
Public
regulations.
comment portion.
And so
you
some
set up
of those
yourself-
include potable water in people's homes, other include businesses and restaurants where people drink water, others include simply taking water from the well to make sure the lead is coming out of the ground in mineral deposits in the ground. And so there's numerous sites at which they take samples, not just single-family homes from the system. And the documents that were provided to the public that have been read numerous times in this meeting are essentially our professionals and the DEP deciding and determining what the lead sampling plan should be for the town to keep everybody safe. And so in the middle of it, when you have different information on various different forms, as I mentioned last time, this information came from the DEP, not the town, because it's draft materials, deliberative materials, but the DEP sent them out anyway. It's very confusing to your residents because they see different information in every report and proposed plan when it's a working document with the DEP until the DEP is satisfied that it fits their regulations and that the plan that you have complies with those regulations and satisfies what you need to do to test your water system. But it is not an individual going to every house and testing everyone's water. That's everyone's personal responsibility in their own home. But as a water provider and purveyor, we have the requirement of testing at different locations throughout the system because, as Mr. Larratanda has rightly pointed out, there are pipes of different materials throughout the system. So if you just test it in one place or one outlet or another place, it doesn't touch any of the other systems. So the DEP, what he's reading to you, is all of the draft trading between the DEP and our professionals here about what is going to be tested and whether that fits the requirements or not. And Mr. Larratanda did it. He, as a citizen, he told the DEP, I don't think this is sufficient. And so they did more research and investigated it and determined it wasn't and told our people we have to do more. So that's what's going on. That's the overall structure of what we're talking about. But in terms of anyone in the town who's concerned that they have a lead service pipe, which is their responsibility under ordinance, they can just go to Home Depot. There's a free water test they'll give you. And then they can give you
Or
a sample.
Lowe's, we're not endorsing.
All right, Home Depot, Lowe's,
The Home
you know
Depot
what
test is an advertising
Larratanda, this
gimmick.
is not-
Is he a member of the public to be talking? This is supposed to be a public comment section, not for an attorney to give a rebuttal.
You've had your 5 minutes.
No, but what's this
Mr.
right to have a
Larratanda,
rebuttal?
I think this is why no one calls back.
Do you have a right to give a rebuttal in a public comment section?
He's not rebutting, okay?
Well,
He's not
obviously
rebutting
he is.
Mr. Larratanda.
This
He's
public
clarifying
comment.
things for
Let's
the
just-
governing
let's just
body
move on with
because
it.
you've made many misrepresentations
No, I
at
did
here
not.
and in the public.
You don't even give a chance to give a representation. 5 minutes, that's a joke.
All right, anybody else? Public comment? All right. Need for executive session, any motions?
Motion to close.
Motion to close public comment?
Second.
He motioned to second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. No need for executive session, so any motion to close?